Tyler crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. That night, while the party raged on, and his twin brother Jace trusted him completely, Tyler made his move. He went to Malik's room, Jace's perfect boyfriend, and what followed was a betrayal that would destro by morning. Jace stood frozen at the door, his world crumbling as he saw the man he loved in his brother's arms. Jealousy, passion, and heartbreak collide in a story where nothing is what it seems. The music thumped through the house, reverberating off the walls as laughter and voices mixed in the air. Jace was in his element, holding court in the living room, his fiery red hair catching the light as he gestured animatedly. Beside him stood Malik, his boyfriend of 2 years, a towering presence with a charming smile that seemed to win over every single person in the room. Tyler lingered on the edges, his glass of whiskey untouched as he watched them. He saw how their parents beamed at Malik, how friends flocked to hear his stories, and how Jace leaned into him with a comfort and ease that made Tyler's chest tighten. This was what he wanted, what he had always wanted. As the night wore on, the drinks flowed freely, loosening tongues and dissolving inhibitions. Jace had insisted on celebrating Malik's first time meeting the entire family and their closest friends, and the night was turning into a roaring success. But for Tyler, it was a slow-burning torment. When Jace pulled him aside in the kitchen to ask if he was enjoying himself, Tyler forced a smile. "Yeah, it's great. Malik's really something." Jace grinned, leaning in conspiratorially. "Isn't he? I can't believe I got so lucky." The words were like a dagger, twisting in Tyler's gut. He nodded quickly and turned back to the counter, pretending to refill his glass. But his mind was spinning. As the hours dragged on, Jace grew tipsy, his laughter echoing through the house. By the time the party began to wind down, he was leaning heavily on Malik, his cheeks flushed and his words slurring. "Ty, take care of him for a sec," Jace said, draping himself across Tyler's shoulders before stumbling toward the guest bathroom. Tyler seized the moment. As Jace disappeared, he led Malik to the guest bedroom, offering him a glass of water and suggesting he rest for a while. Malik hesitated, but eventually agreed, his own steps unsteady from the night's indulgence. Tyler's heart pounded as he closed the door behind Malik. He waited, pacing the hallway, torn between guilt and something darker, something he couldn't quite name. The house quieted as the last guest trickled out, and Jace finally retreated to his bedroom, mumbling something about needing sleep. This was it. Tyler felt the pull, the gnawing envy that had taken root long ago. He hesitated for only a moment before walking to the guest room. The door creaked open, and there Malik lay, sprawled on the bed, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. Tyler stepped inside, his breath shallow. When Malik stirred and glanced up, his eyes heavy-lidded, he smiled. "Jace?" Malik's voice was low and soft. Tyler hesitated, but the words came out before he could stop them. "Yeah, it's me." Malik reached for him, and Tyler let himself be pulled in. Their lips met, and the kiss was electric, sending a thrill down Tyler's spine. He knew it was wrong, knew it would ruin everything. But in that moment, all he could think about was how perfect Malik felt. How, for once, he was the one Malik wanted. The night unfolded in a blur of heat and desperation, a storm of stolen moments that Tyler knew he could never take back. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, Tyler lay beside Malik, his heart pounding with a mix of exhilaration and dread. And then, the sound of the door opening shattered the fragile silence. He turned to see Jace standing there, his face pale and his eyes wide with disbelief. Tyler, what the hell is this? Jace's voice cracked, and Tyler felt the weight of his brother's heartbreak crash over him. The room froze, suspended in a moment of raw, undeniable betrayal. The silence in the room was deafening. Jace stood frozen at the doorway, his fiery red hair disheveled and his piercing green eyes rimmed with tears. His gaze darted from Malik, who was half covered by the crumpled sheets, to Tyler, who sat motionless beside him. Jace, Tyler's voice faltered, the words catching in his throat. What could he say? There was no excuse for what he had done. Jace took a slow step forward, his jaw tightening as if trying to hold himself together. What the hell's going on? He asked, his voice low and trembling with barely restrained fury. Malik sat up, groggy and confused. Jace, wait, I thought... His voice trailed off as realization dawned. His expression shifted from shock to horror as the weight of what had happened settled in. You thought what? Jace snapped, his anger flaring now. That Tyler was me? That makes it okay. He shook his head, his voice breaking. You too. How could you do this to me? Tyler stood abruptly, his hands raised as if to placate his brother. Jace, please, I didn't mean for this to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen? Jace's laugh was sharp and bitter. You were in bed with him, Tyler. Don't act like this was some accident. Malik swung his legs over the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Jace, I swear, I didn't know. I thought it was you. Stop. Jace cut him off, his voice icy. He turned his attention back to Tyler, his anger giving way to something deeper, something more painful. You're my brother. I trusted you. And this is how you repay me? Tyler couldn't meet his brother's eyes. Shame and guilt twisted in his chest. But beneath it all, there was something else. A flicker of defiance. He had spent years living in Jace's shadow, envying his perfect life, his perfect boyfriend. For one night, he had been the one in the spotlight, the one Malik wanted. Do you have any idea what you've done? Jace continued, his voice rising. You didn't just betray me, you destroyed everything. Malik stood, reaching out toward Jace. Please, just let me explain. Don't touch me, Jace snapped, stepping back. The look in his eyes was enough to make Malik drop his hand. I need you both to leave, Jace said after a long pause, his voice quiet but firm. Get out of this house. I can't even look at you right now. Jace, no, Tyler pleaded. You don't mean that. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, Jace said, his voice hardening. You made your choice, Tyler. Now you have to live with it. Tyler hesitated, but the finality in Jace's tone left no room for argument. Malik, still reeling, quickly grabbed his clothes and dressed in silence. Tyler followed suit, his mind racing as he tried to think of something, anything to fix this. But as they stepped out of the room, Jace's voice stopped them cold. Don't come back, he said, his back to them, his shoulders slumped. Not until you're ready to admit what you've done and face the consequences. Tyler felt the weight of those words settle over him like a stone. For the first time, he realized just how much he had lost. As the door closed behind them, the house seemed eerily quiet. Jace sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the rumpled sheets, the smell of betrayal still lingering in the air. He buried his face in his hands, letting the first sobs escape. He had lost the man he loved, and worse, the brother he thought he could trust. The drive back to Malik's apartment was unbearable. Tyler sat silently in the passenger seat, his fists clenched in his lap as Malik gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The tension between them was palpable, thick enough to suffocate. "You didn't have to come with me," Malik said, breaking the silence. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Where else was I supposed to go?" Tyler snapped, though his tone lacked its usual bite. Malik exhaled sharply, but didn't respond. They both knew the answer. Tyler couldn't go back to the house he shared with Jace, not after what had happened. When they arrived at the apartment, Malik unlocked the door without a word. Tyler followed him inside, the weight of his actions pressing down on him harder with every step. The space was painfully familiar. He had been here countless times before, always as Jace's twin, the supportive brother tagging along. Now, it felt like he was trespassing. Malik dropped onto the couch, his head in his hands. Tyler hesitated in the doorway, unsure of what to say. "I thought he was you," Malik said finally, his voice muffled. "You knew that, didn't you? You knew I wouldn't have—" "I didn't plan for it to happen like that," Tyler interrupted. "But I wanted it, Malik. I've wanted you for so long." Malik looked up, his dark eyes burning with a mix of anger and guilt. "You used me, Tyler. You knew how much I care about Jace, and you used me." Tyler's stomach twisted, but he refused to back down. "And what about you? You didn't stop. You didn't realize it wasn't him?" Malik stood abruptly, towering over Tyler. "Because I trusted you. I trusted that you wouldn't—" He cut himself off, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "This is a mess, Tyler. And now, Jace hates both of us." The room fell silent again, the gravity of their actions hanging heavy in the air. Tyler sat down on the edge of a chair, his mind racing. He thought about Jace, how he had looked standing in that doorway, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. Tyler had never seen his brother so broken, and the image was burned into his memory. "We have to fix this," Tyler said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Malik let out a bitter laugh. "And how do you propose we do that? Tell Jace it didn't mean anything? That it was a mistake?" He shook his head. "It doesn't matter what we say. The damage is done." Tyler didn't have an answer. All he knew was that he couldn't bear the thought of losing Jace. Not like this. As the hours dragged on, the two of them avoided each other, each lost in their own thoughts. Tyler tried to sleep on the couch but found no rest. His mind kept replaying the events of the night before, each moment a fresh wound. In the morning, he woke to find Malik standing by the window, staring out at the city. The sun cast a harsh light across his face, highlighting the lines of exhaustion and regret etched into his features. "I'm going to talk to Jace," Malik said without turning around. Tyler sat up, his heart pounding. "And say what?" "I don't know," Malik admitted, "but I have to try. He deserves that much." Tyler nodded, though the thought of facing Jace again filled him with dread. As Malik grabbed his keys and headed for the door, Tyler called after him. "Wait," he said, standing. "I'm coming with you." Malik hesitated, but eventually nodded. "Fine. But if you're going, you'd better be ready to face the truth." As they stepped out of the apartment, Tyler felt a sinking feeling in his chest. He knew this wasn't just about apologizing. This was about facing the consequences of a choice that had changed everything, and accepting that nothing would ever be the same again. The drive to Jace's house felt like a march toward judgment. Neither Tyler nor Malik spoke as they navigated the familiar streets, their shared silence heavy with unspoken dread. Tyler stared out the window, his mind replaying the moment Jace had caught them, the devastation in his brother's eyes seared into his memory. Malik parked outside the house but made no move to get out of the car. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his jaw clenched. "You don't have to come in," he said without looking at Tyler. Tyler shook his head. "I do. He needs to hear it from both of us." They stepped out of the car together, the crisp morning air biting against their skin. Tyler's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the front door. It was the same door he and Jace had walked through 1,000 times, but today it felt foreign, unwelcoming. Malik knocked, his usually steady hand trembling slightly. After a moment, the door swung open, and there stood Jace. His hair was disheveled and dark circles lined his eyes. He looked at them both, his expression cold and unreadable. "What do you want?" Jace's voice was flat, devoid of the warmth it usually carried. "We need to talk," Malik said softly. Jace leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his chest. "Talk? About what? How my boyfriend and my brother betrayed me?" "Jace, please," Tyler began, his voice breaking. "I know what I did was unforgivable, but I need you to understand." "Understand?" Jace cut him off, his voice rising. "You slept with Malik, Tyler. You didn't just betray me. You destroyed the one relationship I thought I could trust." Malik stepped forward, his deep voice steady despite the tension. "Jace, I take full responsibility for what happened. I thought Tyler was you, but I should have realized." Jace held up a hand, silencing him. "Stop. I don't need your excuses. What I need is to figure out how to move on from this mess you both created." The words hit Tyler like a punch to the gut. "Jace, please," he said desperately. "I'll do anything to make this right." "You can't make this right, Tyler," Jace said, his voice breaking. "You took something I'll never get back. I trusted you, and now I don't even know who you are." The weight of Jace's words settled over them like a storm cloud. Tyler felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, but forced them back. He had no right to cry, not after what he had done. Malik looked at Jace, his expression earnest. "I still love you, Jace. What happened doesn't change that." Jace laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Love? Is that what you call it? If you loved me, Malik, you wouldn't have done this." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler and Malik exchanged a glance, but neither of them knew what to say. Finally, Jace stepped back, opening the door wider. "You want to talk? Fine, come in. But don't expect me to forgive you." They entered the house, the once familiar space now charged with tension and heartbreak. Jace led them to the living room, where the remnants of the party still lingered. A forgotten glass on the table, a stray napkin on the floor. "Start talking," Jace said, sitting down and staring at them expectantly. Tyler took a deep breath, his heart hammering in his chest. This was his chance to explain, to take responsibility, to try to salvage what little remained of their relationship. "I was jealous," Tyler admitted, his voice trembling. "I've always been jealous of you, Jace. You have everything, our family's approval, a perfect career, and Malik. I let that jealousy consume me, and I made the worst decision of my life." Jace's gaze didn't waver, but his jaw tightened. Malik spoke next, his tone solemn. "I let my guard down, Jace. I didn't think for one second that Tyler would... I didn't realize what was happening until it was too late." Jace leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "And now what? You think an apology will fix this? That I'll just forget what you did?" No, Tyler said quickly. I don't expect that, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you if I have to. Jay stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, his movements slow and deliberate. I don't know if I can forgive either of you, he said finally. But I know one thing. I can't deal with this right now. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Tyler and Malik alone in the suffocating silence. Jace's retreat left an eerie silence in the house. Tyler and Malik sat on opposite ends of the couch, the weight of Jace's words pressing down on them like a heavy fog. Tyler's chest tightened as he replayed the moment Jace walked out, the cold finality in his voice echoing in his mind. I should have stayed away, Malik muttered, breaking the silence. He stared at the floor, his usually confident demeanor replaced by a palpable sense of regret. Coming here didn't help anything. Tyler looked at him, his stomach twisting. We couldn't just leave it like that. We owed him an explanation. An explanation, Malik snapped, his voice rising. Do you think any of this can be explained? We betrayed him, Tyler. I betrayed the man I love, and you betrayed your own brother. Tyler flinched at the harshness of Malik's words, but didn't argue. He deserved it, every bit of it. Yet a part of him burned with frustration. How had everything gone so wrong so quickly? We need to give him time, Tyler said after a long pause. He'll come around eventually. He has to. Malik shook his head, his jaw tightening. You don't get it, do you? There's no coming back from this. Jace trusted us, and we destroyed that trust. Time doesn't heal something like this. Tyler opened his mouth to respond, but was cut off by the sound of footsteps. Jace reappeared in the doorway, his face pale but composed. He held a small duffel bag in one hand and his car keys in the other. I need space, he said simply, his voice steady but cold. I can't be here right now. Jace, wait, Tyler said, standing quickly. You don't have to go. We'll leave if that's what you want. Jace shook his head. It's not about who leaves, Tyler. It's about me needing to breathe without seeing either of you. I can't even look at you right now. Malik stood as well, his expression pained. Jace, I'll do anything to make this right. Please, just let me. Stop, Jace interrupted, his voice sharp. You've done enough, Malik. Both of you have. He turned toward the door, his movements deliberate and final. I'll be staying with a friend for a while. Don't try to contact me. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk, if I'm ever ready to talk. With that, he walked out, leaving Tyler and Malik standing in stunned silence. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house, a cruel reminder of the divide that now existed between them. Tyler sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. What have I done? He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Malik didn't respond. He simply walked to the window, staring out at the street where Jace's car had just disappeared. For the first time in his life, Malik felt completely powerless. Hours passed, and neither of them moved. The weight of their choices hung heavy in the air, suffocating and unrelenting. Tyler's mind raced with thoughts of what to do next, but every scenario felt hopeless. Finally, Malik turned, his voice low and filled with resolve. I need to fix this, even if it takes the rest of my life. Tyler looked up at him, his eyes bloodshot. How? How do you fix something like this? Malik didn't answer right away. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I don't know, he said finally. But I can't sit here and do nothing. As the door closed behind him, Tyler was left alone in the silence of the house. The party decorations still hung limply from the walls, a mocking reminder of the night that had torn everything apart. He buried his face in his hands, his mind replaying Jace's devastated expression over and over. For the first time, Tyler realized the full weight of his actions. Not just what he had done to Jace, but what he had done to himself. Jace's absence lingered like a shadow over the house. Tyler tried reaching out, sending messages that went unanswered, each one more desperate than the last. Malik kept his distance, spending his days at work and his nights drowning in guilt. One evening, Tyler found himself scrolling through old family photos on his phone. Pictures of him and Jace as kids, inseparable and full of laughter, felt like relics of a life he had shattered. He couldn't escape the question that haunted him. Was there any way to fix this? Meanwhile, Jace sat in a friend's apartment across town, staring at his own phone. The messages from Tyler and Malik sat unread. Part of him wanted to delete them all, to sever the ties completely. But a small part of him still yearned for the brother and partner he thought he knew. The silence between them was louder than any argument could have been. Tyler made one last attempt to reach Jace. He left a heartfelt voicemail, his voice cracking with emotion. Jace, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I was selfish and cruel, and I'll never stop regretting what I did. Please just tell me if there's any chance to make this right. Malik, too, reached out. He sent a long email, baring his soul and confessing every moment of guilt and shame. Jace listened to the voicemail and read the email in the quiet of his temporary refuge. The raw pain in their words was undeniable, but forgiveness still felt impossible. He closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. Weeks later, Jace returned home. He didn't warn Tyler or Malik. He simply walked through the door, his presence startling Tyler, who had been sitting in the living room. You're back, Tyler said, his voice trembling. I'm here to talk, Jace replied curtly. But don't mistake this for forgiveness. The conversation that followed was tense and emotional. Jace laid bare his pain, his anger, and his disappointment. Tyler listened, his head bowed in shame. Malik joined them, his own apologies spilling out in a torrent of regret. By the end of the night, nothing was resolved, but for the first time, there was a small flicker of hope. Jace decided to stay in the house, but the distance between him, Tyler, and Malik was palpable. Conversations were brief and strained, and trust remained broken. Despite the pain, Jace began to rebuild his life, focusing on his career and leaning on friends who reminded him of his worth. Tyler, meanwhile, began therapy to confront the jealousy and insecurities that had driven him to betrayal. Malik threw himself into work, unsure if he and Jace could ever find their way back to the love they once shared. The three of them lived in the uneasy shadow of their choices, unsure if time could ever heal the wounds they had inflicted on each other. How did you feel about this story? Rate it from 1 to 10 and share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you like to see a continuation of this intense and emotional journey? Let us know. And don't forget to share this story to help grow the LGBTQ+ community with love and understanding.